Welcome to our channel, where we uncover untold stories and truths that often go unnoticed in the light. Today, we invite you to join us in exploring a heartbreaking issue that remains hidden beneath the glossy appearance of a well-known state, Ohio. Our story today revolves around Relay, a 6-year-old boy with a dream of flying into space, becoming an astronaut. But right now, what Relay wants the most is not a spaceship, but a warm bed and a roof over his head to protect him from the cold winds of the American Midwest. Relay's story is just one of thousands of untold stories that belong to the homelessness crisis silently escalating in Ohio. While Ohio is known for its major cities like Columbus and Cleveland, where the economy is thriving and large industries are prominent, few are aware that this state is grappling with a serious homelessness crisis. Families, children like Relay, are forced to live in cars, makeshift tents, or unstable shelters. This raises a big question. Why is a prosperous state allowing so many of its people to live like this? Let's dive deep into this story and explore the reasons behind the stark contrast between wealth and the destitute lives of people without a place to call home. Ohio, a state full of life with cities like Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati, is known for its strong economy and major industries. The name Ohio often evokes images of shiny car factories, modern skyscrapers, and busy industrial zones, where workers are dedicating every drop of sweat to building a brighter future. However, if you look deeper into the darker corners of this state, you will realize that the shadow of poverty and homelessness is spreading, and the very contradictions in Ohio's economy are making this issue increasingly severe. Ohio boasts a robust economy with key industries like automobile manufacturing, steel, and technology, helping the state maintain an important position in the national economy. However, this bright economic picture does not reflect the reality of all Ohio residents. The majority of the poor are not benefiting from this prosperity. While Ohio's major industries continue to grow, poor workers and families who cannot afford to make ends meet are being left behind. These people cannot enjoy the fruits of the state's wealth. They can only gaze at the affluent urban areas, where people live in luxury homes, while they continue to struggle in the dark corners of the city, living in cars, under torn tarps, or even in areas without electricity and clean water. Despite Ohio having a significant budget surplus, this money is not being used to address pressing social issues, especially the increasing homelessness crisis. Instead, it is being poured into lavish infrastructure projects that cater to the wealthy. Bustling neighborhoods, towering buildings, and large parks are quickly rising, while the poor have nowhere safe to shelter. The state government, instead of prioritizing investment in programs to help the homeless and low-income families, continues to allocate funds to development projects for the rich, such as luxury apartment complexes, amusement parks, and upscale housing projects. This is an unfair budget allocation that creates an ever-widening gap between the rich and the poor, between homeowners and those living on the streets. The problem has become even more severe as housing prices in major cities like Columbus and Cleveland have skyrocketed in recent years. Rent for an apartment in these areas has increased by 40 to 50%, making it impossible for low-income families to afford affordable housing. An apartment that could previously be rented for $800 is now priced at $2,200, a rate far too high for those working full-time with a minimum wage of just $7.25 an hour. This raises a big question. Why is a wealthy state allowing working families to live in poverty when they cannot afford basic living expenses? Along with rising housing prices, low wages are also a key factor contributing to homelessness. The minimum wage in Ohio remains just $7.25 per hour and has not changed since 2009. Meanwhile, living costs, including rent, food, and healthcare, have skyrocketed. Although many people work full-time, they still cannot afford to meet basic needs. Many families are forced to live in cars or temporary shelters because they cannot afford a stable home. Moreover, financial support for the poor and homeless has been increasingly scarce. After the pandemic, unemployment benefits and rental assistance programs were cut or restricted, making it even more difficult for struggling families. Those who have lost their jobs or have unstable employment cannot receive timely support from the government, and they are left to live in homelessness or fight to survive in the worst conditions. According to a report from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, homelessness in Ohio has increased by 23% between 2020 and 2023. This clearly shows the rising number of people living without stable housing, especially in the context of a struggling economy and rising living costs. Homeless shelters cannot meet the demand of the homeless, and many places have had to turn people away because they no longer have space. Those who need a safe place to stay cannot find a roof over their heads. The contradiction within Ohio's economy is the unreasonable allocation of budgets and resources, where the poor and homeless are not supported sufficiently to escape poverty. Lavish construction projects and developments serving the upper class are increasingly dominating the space, while those in need are left behind. And while Ohio continues to thrive, many of its residents are fighting each day just to survive in the most appalling conditions. In recent years, housing prices in major Ohio cities like Columbus and Cleveland have surged by 40 to 50%. These numbers are not just percentages reflecting value changes, but figures that are pushing thousands of families into despair. An apartment that could previously be rented for $800 is now priced at $2,200, a rate that is out of reach for low-income families. Moreover, this rent increase is growing faster than wage growth, turning the dream of stable housing for many Ohio residents into an impossible reality. In a thriving Ohio with major companies and booming industries, workers are facing a harsh reality. The minimum wage is still $7.25/hour, a number that has not changed since 2009. This minimum wage cannot guarantee them a stable life when living costs are rising every day. If a worker works full-time, they can only earn about $1,200/month, which is not enough to cover basic expenses such as rent, food, and healthcare. To maintain a living, many families are forced to struggle with difficult choices, even accepting to live in the most deprived conditions. Amid the freezing weather of Ohio, these workers, despite working hard day and night, still cannot have the most basic needs: a warm home, a full meal for their families. They are forced to live in cars, sleep in temporary shelters, as the money they earn is only enough to get through the day. Meanwhile, the cost of living continues to rise, especially rent prices, pushing these families into even deeper despair. To make matters worse, financial support measures for the poor and homeless have been increasingly reduced. Rental assistance and unemployment benefits, crucial tools that helped poor families maintain their lives during tough times, have been significantly cut after the pandemic. This not only adds financial difficulties for Ohioans, but also prevents them from relying on solutions that could help them overcome this situation. When these support measures are eliminated, families living below the poverty line become even more vulnerable. They no longer have enough money to rent a home, nor can they afford healthcare or education for their children. Poor families in Ohio, despite working hard, endure the immeasurable burden of deprivation. Meanwhile, the wealthy continue to enjoy the privileges that the system provides, unaware of the suffering that low-income workers face every day. This reality raises a question: why is there such blatant injustice? Why does a wealthy state like Ohio allow thousands of families to live in deprivation while surplus resources are allocated to lavish projects serving the wealthy? The homelessness crisis in Ohio is at an alarming level. According to a report from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the number of homeless people in the state has increased by 23% between 2020 and 2023. This is not just a statistic. It is a harsh reality affecting thousands of Ohioans, especially low-income workers and families struggling to find stable shelter. This increase clearly reflects the housing crisis that Ohio is facing. While the economy continues to grow, the burdens of high living costs and skyrocketing rent have pushed thousands of people into homelessness. Streets that were once safe for families are now places they fear to stay. Makeshift shelters have become more crowded than ever, while many still live in cars or under porches, unsure of what the future holds. We can see more and more homeless people, not only in impoverished areas but also in major cities like Columbus and Cleveland. These people, despite working hard, whether as construction workers, drivers, or restaurant staff, have been left behind as living costs increase and wages remain insufficient. They no longer have the opportunity to secure a home. These numbers are not just statistics. They are faces, stories of lives that have been forgotten. Homelessness is not just about the number of people without shelter, but also about the shortage of shelter. The current shelters in Ohio cannot meet the growing demand of the homeless. Although the government has made efforts to expand shelters and provide support services, in reality, these shelters frequently face overcrowding. Many shelters have had to turn people away because there is no more space. Some can only provide makeshift beds, lacking basic amenities like clean water or proper sanitation. Homeless people not only face material hardships but also endure psychological pain when forced to live under extremely poor conditions. Especially, homeless people cannot find a safe place to live. They are excluded from shelters simply due to lack of space, while their suffering goes unnoticed. This is the tragic paradox, where a prosperous state like Ohio cannot provide shelter for those who need it most. Besides the lack of basic facilities, accessing support services is also a major challenge. Despite many nonprofit organizations and government agencies working hard to address this issue, limited resources and lack of coordination have prevented any significant improvement. Homeless people not only lack housing but also lack essential services like healthcare, children's education, and psychological support. When shelters cannot meet the demand, people are forced to live in marginal areas with no protection or safety. These individuals may be veterans, low-income workers, or single-parent families, but they all share one thing in common: a life left behind, unprotected, and without a future. Finally, the lack of shelter and social support has driven these individuals into a state of despair. Once trapped in this cycle, few can escape. Homeless children live in dire conditions and are unable to access stable education. Adults face concerns about their health and mental well-being, unable to find help. Homelessness is not just a housing crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis, and it threatens the future of those living on the margins of society. One of the deeper causes of homelessness in Ohio is the lack of health insurance. According to statistics, around 5% of Ohio's population is uninsured, making access to healthcare services incredibly difficult. Those without insurance are forced to bear the cost of healthcare when they fall ill, and a minor illness or accident can push them into poverty and homelessness. Meanwhile, for low-income families, healthcare costs are a burden they cannot afford. Without timely care, their health deteriorates, and once again, they are pushed out of society. The reality is that a minor illness or accident can make a family lose everything. Without health insurance, they cannot afford basic healthcare services. This can lead to prolonged illness, the loss of the ability to work, and ultimately, an inability to pay for housing, food, or other basic needs. The lack of health insurance puts Ohioans at greater risk of homelessness than ever before. When there is no health, life becomes precarious, and an accident or illness can be the last straw that plunges them into misery. Additionally, mental health care issues are further exacerbated within the homeless community. Those who experience psychological trauma due to unstable lives, or veterans and victims of domestic violence, cannot access the mental health services they desperately need. Ohio's community healthcare system, despite some efforts, is still not strong enough to meet the needs of the homeless. These individuals, especially those who have suffered deep trauma, need psychological support to recover and reintegrate into society. However, the shortage of mental health services and lack of support from the public healthcare system has prevented them from overcoming their pain. When untreated, psychological trauma not only makes the homeless feel isolated and desperate, but also increases the likelihood that they will face other issues like substance abuse, depression, and anxiety disorders. These mental health issues will only worsen the state of homelessness, making it impossible for them to break free from the vicious cycle of poverty and illness. Without psychological support, they will continue to live in fear and will never have the chance to rebuild their lives. Moreover, when mental health services are scarce, homeless individuals cannot find the necessary support to overcome the deep wounds they carry. These psychological scars are not just painful memories, but obstacles that prevent them from healing and reintegrating into the community. Without proper support, they are trapped in an unstable mental state, unable to find a way out, and unable to overcome the hardships of life. Addressing homelessness is not just about providing shelter, but ensuring that these individuals receive comprehensive health care, including mental health care. Ohio's government and nonprofit organizations need to expand healthcare services, ensuring that everyone, especially the homeless, can access basic medical services and psychological support. Only with these changes will the homeless be able to escape the vicious cycle of poverty, illness, and despair and find the opportunity to rebuild their lives. No one can change their life easily, but at the very least, if we can provide the basics like health and psychological care, homeless individuals will have a chance to find hope again, to start over, and to live a more dignified life. In every major city in Ohio, amidst the busy streets and bright lights, There are faces that society has forgotten, people who have been left behind, living in solitude and despair, searching for a place to hide from the storm of life. They are single mothers, low-wage workers, and those unfortunate enough to be caught in the cycle of poverty. The story of Lisa, a 32-year-old single mother, is representative of the challenges many women face when raising children in a state of homelessness. Lisa is a resilient mother, but over the years, her life has been pushed to the brink of crisis. After the pandemic, when Ohio's economy was severely impacted, Lisa not only faced reduced working hours but also had to watch her rent increase by $400 each month. This was a huge amount for a single mother with 2 young children. Before the pandemic, Lisa could cover her living expenses, but now everything had changed. She had to work double, sometimes even triple shifts, but still couldn't make enough to sustain a stable life for her family. The long days of hard work not only exhausted Lisa, but also made her feel like she was trapped in an endless cycle. Each time she paid the rent, she worried whether she would have enough to cover other basic needs like food and clothing for her children. These worries haunted her, leaving her feeling suffocated, as though all hope for a stable life had been stripped away. Eventually, when she could no longer maintain stability in her apartment, Lisa and her 2 children had to leave their home and move into a temporary shelter. She had no other option but to turn to these shelters, where there was no privacy, no full protection for her children. She knew that although the shelter could provide them with temporary safety, it was not a place to build a future. But when every door had closed, this shelter became the only place she could find for herself and her children. Lisa is not the only one. Across Ohio and the country, there are thousands of single mothers facing similar circumstances. These women are not only fighting to maintain financial stability, but also dealing with the unbearable emotional pain. Women like Lisa, despite being strong and resilient, still have to hide their pain, fatigue, and anxiety while trying to maintain a stable life for their children. Single mothers face instability not only financially, but also emotionally. They cannot express their fears because they don't want their children to sense their insecurity. They have no time to care for themselves or heal from the psychological trauma that life's hardships have caused. The lack of financial resources only makes them feel abandoned, unsupported by society like other families. Many mothers like Lisa have had to face homelessness due to a lack of financial support from the government and community. Meanwhile, some housing policies and support services are not strong enough to help them maintain stable lives. These mothers cannot escape the cycle of poverty, as every day is a battle between earning enough money and keeping their families from being pushed out of society. They are forced to live in temporary conditions, unable to protect their children from the difficulties and anxieties they face. And when family and child support services are not strong enough, these children continue to grow up in deprivation, with very few opportunities to escape poverty and achieve a better life. Lisa's story is a heartbreaking one, but it is also the story of many others. Single mothers like Lisa, along with their children, are living in hardship, unsure of when they will be able to escape. People like Lisa need not only financial support, but also empathy, understanding, and practical support programs from the community and the government. This is the only way they can have a better chance for the future, so that these children can grow up in a world full of hope instead of poverty and deprivation. Stories like Lisa's are not just personal problems, but a major societal issue. These mothers deserve support, and housing policies, financial assistance, and mental health care must be changed and improved to help families living in homelessness. When our society can provide them with opportunities to reintegrate and rebuild their lives, that's when we will truly create a fairer and more compassionate society. The homelessness crisis in Ohio and many other places is having serious consequences for children, those who are suffering the worst effects of this crisis. More than 1 million children in the United States are currently living in homelessness, and their education is at serious risk. Children are the most vulnerable group in the homelessness crisis, and they are enduring immeasurable physical and mental disadvantages. Lack of access to education is one of the most evident consequences for homeless children. These children often have to move from place to place, which means constantly changing schools. Moving from one school to another not only disrupts their learning process, but also severely impacts their emotional stability. The lack of stable housing means homeless children lose important opportunities to maintain a consistent education and develop holistically. In addition to having to change schools, Many children are forced to drop out because their families do not have a fixed address and cannot complete the enrollment procedures. The inability to access stable education not only causes them to miss out on learning opportunities, but also impacts their future. The difficulty of maintaining their education is also a major issue. Housing instability makes it hard for them to focus on studying, and the psychological stress from living in deprivation prevents them from completing assignments or fully participating in educational activities. The difficulty of registering and maintaining education becomes a significant barrier for homeless children. Without a fixed address, many families struggle to enroll their children in school. This leads to homeless children being unable to attend classes regularly, losing opportunities for development. Without a stable environment to study in, these children cannot focus on their education and are constantly living in insecurity and anxiety about their future. When these children cannot access education, their future becomes increasingly uncertain and hopeless. Additionally, the lack of education affects the psychological and social development of homeless children. These children are often living in constant anxiety and stress, which reduces their ability to concentrate on learning and develop the necessary social skills. They cannot experience normal educational experiences like other children, and this long-term impact affects their communication and social interaction skills as they grow up. Education is the key to breaking the cycle of poverty and homelessness, but when children cannot access education, they are deprived of the opportunity to change their lives. The stress from instability prevents these children from reaching their full potential. They will continue to grow up in poverty, lacking the knowledge and skills to overcome life's challenges. As a result, they will continue to face a vicious cycle of poverty and homelessness, just like their parents before them. The homelessness situation in Ohio reflects a deep division in policies and society. Despite having a strong economy, the state allows thousands of its residents to live in poverty and deprivation. The unfair allocation of resources is the main cause of the increasing homelessness, as resources are prioritized for projects that serve the wealthy, while the poor are left behind. A big question that needs to be raised is, what responsibility do the government and organizations have in addressing this issue? Policy changes are needed to allocate resources fairly, invest in affordable housing and social services, and strengthen support measures like rental assistance, public land reuse, and raising the minimum wage to ensure stable living conditions for everyone. However, small actions from the community can also make a big difference. Act today. Share this video to raise awareness of homelessness in Ohio and call for change in policy. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to join us on the journey to create a fairer and more compassionate society. Together, we can make a difference.